Welcome to my channel, The World of Science Fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
Planet Krill was a graveyard. Prospector geologist Kale knew this from the moment his exploration schooner, the Wanderer, tore itself apart in the upper atmosphere. He could still hear Lena's scream over the intercom, abruptly silenced by the shriek of tearing metal. Compensator failure. We're breaking up. Then static. Nothing. He checked the gravitational compensators himself before atmospheric entry. They had been in perfect working order. The system had lied to him. Through the viewport of his emergency pod, he had watched helplessly as the ship that had been his home for 3 years disintegrated into a shower of burning metal against the blood-red sky. Lena's pod had never ejected. Neither had Thomas's. Their vital signs flatlined on his monitor one by one, leaving him in a deafening silence broken only by the sound of his own ragged breathing and the pod's warning klaxons. After the brutal landing, Kyle had salvaged what he could from the crumpled escape pod. The emergency beacon was damaged, broadcasting weakly, if at all. His exosuit had sustained damage to its left leg, patched with emergency sealant. As he rummaged through the pod's storage compartment, his fingers closed around a familiar shape. Lena's geological hammer, its handle polished tungsten with their expedition motto etched along the side. Beyond horizons, beneath surfaces. She'd given it to him the night before they launched from Earth Station. For when you find that perfect sample, she'd said, pressing it into his hand, something worthy of us both. Now he held it against his chest for a moment, the metal cold even through his gloves. It was all that remained of her, of their shared dream to discover worlds no human eyes had seen before. After a long moment, he secured it to his utility belt and stepped out into the alien desert. Now, as the sole survivor, he limped across endless dunes of pulverized metal and crimson sand. Each step sent waves of pain through his injured leg, the makeshift bandage visible through a tear in his exosuit. The twin suns mercilessly scorched the sky, turning the horizon into a shimmering haze that played cruel tricks on his desperate mind. He paused, kneeling to collect a sample of the red sand. His wrist scanner analyzed it automatically, displaying results that confirmed his worst fears. Silica content, 83%, he muttered, studying the readout. Trace elements, iron oxide, crystalline thorium. The composition wasn't just inhospitable, it was actively lethal. The sand itself was a microscopic death sentence waiting to be inhaled. He tapped his emergency beacon again, but the diagnostics showed critical damage to the transmitter array. The signal was broadcasting at less than 10% strength, barely enough to reach orbit, let alone the nearest outpost. He tried to repair it 3 times already, but without proper tools, it was hopeless. With trembling fingers, he pulled up the crew manifest on his suit's display. 5 faces smiled back at him, unaware they were now memorials. His thumb lingered over Lena's image, the ship's navigator and his partner of 2 years. They'd planned to request a joint assignment after this mission. Now she was atomized across Krill's upper atmosphere, and he was trudging through her ashes. His exosuit, once a marvel of engineering that had protected him on 17 hostile worlds, was now a patched-up shell. The temperature regulator struggled to keep him from cooking inside it, and the water reserve indicator blinked with the insistence of a death sentence. 8 hours remaining, perhaps less. But it wasn't thirst that drove him now. It was the wind. It began as a distant howl, like the keening of some ancient beast mourning across the desert. His suit's sensors began to flash warnings, increasing static electricity, pressure fluctuations, particulate matter rising. The sky above him changed color, shifting from crimson to a deep, bruised purple. The air crackled with electricity, raising the hairs on his arms even beneath the protective layers of his suit. Within minutes, it escalated into a deafening roar that shook the very ground beneath his feet. This wasn't just sand. The mining colony he'd communicated with before his crash had warned him about them. Glass storms, or they called them, hurricanes carrying microscopic, razor-sharp silica shards that danced on electromagnetic currents, capable of stripping flesh from bone in seconds. His suit's external sensors began to wail. Warning, particulate velocity exceeding safe parameters. Suit integrity compromised. Not like this, Kyle muttered through cracked lips, desperately scanning his surroundings. not after surviving the crash. He scanned the desolate landscape with increasing desperation. There was nothing but endless dunes and rock formations. The emergency beacon on his suit had been damaged in the landing, sending only intermittent signals that might never reach anyone in this forgotten corner of space. Then he saw it, a dark gash in a towering rock massif about 300 meters ahead, like a gaping wound in the red stone. A cave, his only chance. The first particles of silica struck his helmet's visor, leaving tiny scratches that distorted his vision. He instinctively raised his arm to shield the visor, though he knew the gesture was futile. The wind was picking up faster than he'd anticipated, the howl becoming a shriek that drowned out even the sound of his own labored breathing. Cale threw himself forward, pouring his last reserves of strength into each agonizing step. His muscles burned with the effort, his injured leg threatening to collapse beneath him. The storm was almost upon him now, the sky darkening as the glass particles blotted out the suns. Each impact against his suit felt like a tiny needle searching for a way through, and finding it as pain flared across his shoulder where a seal had weakened. Come on, he gasped, his lungs aching as he pushed himself to the limit. With the cave entrance just meters away, a powerful gust knocked him sideways. He stumbled, fell to one knee, and felt the first truly dangerous impacts of glass against his suit, like thousands of tiny knives searching for a way in. With a primal scream that tore at his throat, he launched himself the final distance. He stumbled inside a moment before the world outside became a roaring, impenetrable chaos. Safety was a fleeting thought, instantly shattered as a deafening crack echoed through the cave. The entrance he had just passed through collapsed beneath tons of rock, sealing him inside. The sudden darkness was absolute, broken only by the emergency lights on his suit that automatically activated. He was trapped. Cal breathed heavily, leaning against a cold wall as the realization of his situation sank in. It took several minutes for his eyes to adjust to the semi-darkness, the pitiful glow of his suit's emergency lamps barely illuminating his immediate surroundings. When his vision cleared, he saw that the cave was immense, its walls faintly shimmering with strange crystalline veins that caught and reflected the light in hypnotic patterns. The silence was oppressive after the storm's fury, pressing in on his ears until he could hear the blood pulsing through his veins. He checked his suit systems. Water reserves, 7 hours. Oxygen recycler, functioning at 82% efficiency. Communications, dead. His geological scanner was still operational at least, small mercies. He was alone, cut off from the world outside, with limited supplies and no way to call for help. Or so he thought. From the deepest, darkest part of the cave, a sound reached his ears, a slow, rhythmic pulsing like a massive heartbeat. Then came movement, something enormous shifting in the darkness beyond his light's reach. A massive silhouette, formless yet somehow menacing, began to advance toward him. Kyle drew his utility knife, the blade pathetically small against whatever approached. "Stay back!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the cavern. He lunged forward, slashing at the air in front of the advancing shadow. The blade struck something, not flesh or stone, but an invisible barrier that sparked with blue energy. To his horror, the knife's molecular diamond edge cracked, then shattered completely, leaving him holding a useless handle. From the deepest, darkest part of the cave, a whisper emerged. It wasn't a sound that came to him through his ears. It was more like a thought that slithered directly into his skull, bypassing his senses entirely. The voice was ancient, dry as the sands outside, and filled with a latent hunger that made the hairs on Cale's neck stand on end. "You are the first meal in 500 years." Along with the words came a vision, his own memory, but twisted, magnified in its horror. Lena's face contorted in terror as the ship broke apart around her, her scream lingering long after it should have ended. The vision was so vivid, so unexpected, that Cale fell to his knees, gasping. "Who's there?" Cale called out, his voice breaking. "Get out of my head!" The massive form continued its approach, each movement sending tremors through the cave floor. Cale pressed himself against the wall, his mind racing through options. None of them good. The broken knife handle fell from his trembling fingers. From behind the giant silhouette, another figure emerged. Smaller, humanoid. As it stepped closer, it spoke in a language Cale had never heard. Musical and complex, with sounds his human ears could barely process. His suit's universal translator sputtered, catching only fragments. Hunger. End. Sacrifice. The figure stepped into the pool of light cast by Kale's suit, and he saw that it was a woman. Her skin, the color of deep twilight, seemed almost to glow in the gloom with an inner luminescence. Long ash-white hair was gathered into an intricate braid that fell to her waist, adorned with what looked like small crystals or bones. She was barefoot and dressed in simple clothes of coarse fabric, but she held herself with an innate dignity that even the despair in her eyes could not hide. She spoke again, and this time the translator caught more. Last one, dying. Your fault? Who are you? Kyle asked hoarsely, instinctively backing away from both figures. The woman tilted her head, studying him. Then, seeming to make a decision, she switched to his language, her accent strange but her words clear. You understand this speech? Good. She ignored his question, her gaze fixed on the colossus moving behind her. Her eyes were striking, large, almond-shaped, with irises the color of molten silver. He is dying, she said quietly, her voice clear and melodic. A stark contrast to the chilling whisper that had invaded his mind. And now because of you, we will all die here. The voice, that vision, that was him, Kyle asked, still struggling to understand, the memory of Lena's scream echoing in his mind. Lyra shook her head, the tiny crystals in her hair catching the light. Number, that was me. My test. I had to know who you were. A threat or... She trailed off, her gaze dropping to where his knife had been. Or a meal. Cal finished with a bitter smirk. Not your flesh, outsider, she said, a note of irritation in her voice. His food is minerals, specific rare earth elements. For 500 years he has starved in this cave because the rock here is barren. I thought your ship, it might have held the metals he needs. But now it is buried under the rocks, just as we are. Cal looked past her at the massive symbiote. He could now see that its obsidian-like surface was dull and riddled with cracks, from which a pale, phosphorescent slime oozed. The creature wasn't just big, it was ancient and sick. And you, he asked, what do you eat? I survive, she replied simply. The cave provides enough for one. My scanner ... Kyle began, activating the geological analyzer on his wrist. He aimed the beam at the cave walls, then at the Guardian. The data that appeared on his display confirmed her words. The walls were ordinary sandstone with trace elements of iron and copper. Nothing special. And the symbiote's composition showed a complex silicon-based structure, desperately in need of isotopes found on this planet only in meteoric rock, or in high-tech alloys. Kale's gaze fell to his own exosuit, composite armor, a weave of polymers and metals designed to withstand extreme conditions, including alloys based on the very elements the Guardian needed. As he examined his suit, his eyes caught on something that made him freeze. The Galaxy Corp logo emblazoned on his chest plate, the stylized GC with a spiral galaxy behind it, the universal symbol of the most powerful megacorporation in human space, his employer for the past 5 years. Lyra followed his gaze, and a desperate, wild hope flickered in her silver eyes. You ... I can't take it off, Kale said quickly, taking another step back. The air outside is poisoned with silica dust. My lungs would turn to stone in a couple of hours. The hope in her eyes vanished, replaced by something harder, more desperate. In a sudden movement, she lunged at him, faster than any human could move, her hands grasping for the clasps of his chest plate. Wait! Kyle shouted, struggling against her unexpected strength. You'll kill me. One life for an entire civilization, she hissed, her silver eyes now flashing with desperation. It is a fair exchange. Before the struggle could escalate, a deep rumble emanated from the Guardian. The creature's surface rippled, and a tendril of energy stretched between it and Lyra. She froze, then slowly released Kale, stepping back with clear reluctance. He disagrees, she said, bitterness edging her voice. He says violence is not our way, even now. She sat on a rock, wrapping her arms around her knees. Proud, defeated, awaiting the end. Cal looked at her, at the dying giant, at the caved-in entrance. He was a geologist, a man used to solving problems, not waiting for death. The idea forming in his mind was reckless, foolish, but it was the only option. He walked over to her, and she flinched, readying for another attack. But he just sat down beside her on the cold stone, close enough to talk, far enough to respect her space. "Tell me about them," he asked quietly. "About your people." Lyra looked at him, suspicion warring with surprise in her eyes. "Why would you care? You're trapped here dying. We are nothing to you." "I'm a scientist. Knowledge it's what I live for." He tapped the small insignia on his chest plate, the universal symbol for a planetary geologist. "And if we're going to die anyway, we might as well not die ignorant." Lyra studied him, her silver eyes seeming to peer directly into his soul. But his eyes held no pity, no lust, no hidden agenda, only a genuine, scientific curiosity. And so she began to speak. The days turned into cycles of sleep and wakefulness, marked only by the dimming and brightening of Kyle's exosuit emergency lamps. Outside, the storm howled with unabated fury, burying the collapsed entrance under new layers of sand and rock. During their third day together, Kel noticed a troubling change in the cave's atmosphere. His suit's environmental sensors detected increasing levels of methane seeping from fissures in the deeper recesses. "The air," he said, showing Lyra the readings on his wrist display. "It's changing. These levels will become toxic within days." Lyra nodded grimly. The Guardian's weakening state disturbs the cave's balance. As he fades, the protective barrier he maintained against the planet's natural gases weakens. "It's another countdown we face." She led him to a small alcove where their meager water supply collected in a shallow basin. "This too grows scarcer," she said, dipping her fingers into the liquid. "The spring that feeds it weakens with each passing day. The Guardian once purified and channeled it, but now—" Cal looked at the dwindling puddle. "How long?" 4 days, perhaps 5. Her silver eyes met his. "Not enough time for your rescue, outsider." "Then we need to understand more," Kel said. "About the Guardian, about your people. There must be something we're missing." Lyra studied him for a moment, then reached a decision. "There is a way to show you, rather than tell you." She approached the Guardian and placed her palm against its obsidian surface. "He carries not just knowledge, but memory." The massive entity pulsed in response to her touch. Suddenly, the crystalline veins running through the cave walls flared with light. The illumination coalesced in the center of the chamber, swirling like liquid starlight before resolving into 3-dimensional images that surrounded them. Kale gasped as he found himself standing in the midst of an alien city. Towering spires of living crystal reached toward a sky of deep amber, their surfaces rippling with patterns of light that seemed to form a language he almost understood. Alari people, all with Lyra's blue skin and silver eyes, moved through floating walkways, their bodies adorned with symbiotic crystalline growths that enhanced their natural forms. "This was Aerialis," Lyra said, her voice tinged with reverence. "Our capital city, as it stood 5 centuries ago." Cal reached out, his hand passing through the projection of an Alari child who ran laughing through what appeared to be a garden of geometric plants. "It's incredible," he whispered. "The resolution, the detail, it's like we're really there." "These are not recordings," Lyra explained. "They are living memories, preserved within the Guardian's consciousness. Every Guardian was connected to a vast network that spanned our civilization. When the others fell, this one absorbed what memories it could salvage." The scene shifted. Now they stood in a vast chamber where dozens of Guardians, smaller than Lyra's companion, but similarly formed, pulsed in unison around a central pool of silver liquid. "The nexus," Lyra said, "where our technology and biology merge completely. Here our ancestors communed directly with the planetary consciousness." As they watched, Alari scientists worked alongside the Guardians, their hands manipulating complex 3-dimensional equations that hung in the air like constellations. Kale's eyes widened as he recognized theories of geological formation that went far beyond current human understanding. "Your people understood planetary core dynamics at a level we've barely theorized," he said in awe, walking around a floating model of what appeared to be a world being formed. This is revolutionary. The way you channeled tectonic energies." "We were peaceful," Lyra continued, a sad smile touching her lips as she watched his excitement. "Our technologies focused on healing, on synthesis with our environment. We had no weapons, no defenses." The scene darkened, the beautiful projections giving way to chaos and fire. Ships descended from the sky, angular predatory vessels that rained destruction upon the crystal cities. Each ship bore a symbol that made Kale's blood run cold, the stylized GC with a spiral galaxy behind it, Galaxicorp, the same logo emblazoned on his own exosuit. The memory was fragmented, jumping between scenes of devastation. Guardians falling, their bodies shattering. Alari people fleeing through collapsing structures. The sky itself burning with chemical fire. Kale's military training immediately recognized tactical patterns in the attack. Strategic bombardment, systematic elimination of critical infrastructure. This was no random raid. It was a calculated extermination. They came without warning, Lyra said, her voice hollow. Corporate interests from distant worlds. They wanted our crystal technology, our symbiotic sciences. When we refused to surrender our guardians for study and exploitation, they decided to take by force what we wouldn't give freely. Her eyes suddenly widened as she noticed Kale's gaze fixed on the ship's insignia. She spun to face him, her expression shifting from sorrow to rage as she looked at the matching logo on his chest plate. "You!" she hissed, backing away. "You are one of them! The destroyers!" Cal raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Lyra, wait, it's not what you think." "Not what I think." Her voice trembled with fury. "You wear their mark. The same mark that adorned the ships that burned our world. Galaxicorp is a megacorporation that employs billions across thousands of worlds," Kyle said urgently. "I'm just a geologist in their planetary survey division. I map resources, study formations. To prepare for their mining operations, their theft? To advance knowledge," he insisted. "I didn't even know your people existed until now. The corporation has hundreds of divisions. I have nothing to do with their military actions. Yet you serve them." Kyle's shoulders slumped. "I did. But after what I've seen here, after what they did to my ship..." He looked up, meeting her eyes. "The ship's destruction wasn't an accident. Your guardian showed me. It was an ancient Alari defense system that brought us down. But why would it target a geological survey vessel unless it was programmed to recognize Galaxicorp signatures?" Lyra finished, her anger cooling slightly as understanding dawned. "Your employers sacrificed your ship. They knew about the defense system and sent you in first." "As bait," Kyle said, the bitterness rising in his throat. "To test if the planet was safe for their real interests?" He looked down at the corporate logo on his chest. "I'm as much a victim of their ruthlessness as your people were." Lyra studied him, doubt and centuries of ingrained hatred warring in her eyes. "Words are easy. Prove it." Cal watched in horror as the civilization crumbled. The projection showed Alari keepers, clearly identified by their white hair and ceremonial markings, leading their guardians into hiding. One by one, they were hunted down across the decades that followed, until only one remained. The final memory showed a woman who looked remarkably like Lyra, her mother, Kale realized, placing her newborn daughter's hand against the guardian's surface for the first time, establishing the bond that would define Lyra's life. As the projections continued, the scene shifted to something entirely unexpected. A small group of Alari, wounded and dying after a battle, were brought before a guardian, much like Lyra's companion, but healthy and vibrant. The injured were placed in contact with the guardian's surface, and as Kyle watched, their bodies seemed to dissolve, absorbed into the living crystal. "What's happening to them?" he asked, unable to hide his horror. "Not death," Lyra said softly. "Transformation. When an Alari's physical form was beyond saving, their consciousness could be preserved within a guardian. It was our way of achieving continuity beyond bodily death." "You mean they became part of it? Their mind survived?" "More than survived. They were integrated, enhanced. The individual remained, but became part of a greater whole." She gestured to the guardian behind them. "Many thousands of my people live on within him. Not just their memories, their very essence." Kale's scientific mind rebelled against the concept. "That sounds like a comforting myth, a religious belief rather than..." "It is fact," Lyra interrupted. "How do you think I communicate with him? Through mysticism? Number. It is because those within him can still think, still reach out, still connect." The guardian pulsed as if in agreement, sending ripples of light across its surface. "So when you die..." Kyle began. I too will join with him, she confirmed. But without new minerals, without a means to sustain his physical form, that union will be our final extinction. Both of us will fade into nothing. As they explored these memory projections, Kyle worked methodically. First, it was a small piece of armor from his shin. Using his multi-tool, he carefully detached the plate, feeling his suit become vulnerably thin beneath it. What are you doing? Lyra asked, alarm in her voice as she watched him approach the Guardian with the piece of metal in his hand. An experiment, he replied, glancing at his suit's environmental monitor, which showed the methane levels climbing another fraction. Your Guardian needs minerals, and we need cleaner air. Let's see if my suit has what he needs. He placed the plate on the symbiote's surface. For a few tense seconds, nothing happened. Then thin, thread-like tendrils extended from the creature's depths. They wrapped around the metal, and it began to slowly dissolve, absorbed into the dark mass. The Guardian's pulse became a little steadier, and the cracks on its body seemed to slightly mend. Almost immediately, Kale's sensors detected a slight improvement in the air quality as the Guardian's natural filtration abilities strengthened. Lyra held her breath, her eyes wide with disbelief. It's working, Kale said, checking his scanner. The alloys in my suit, they're similar enough to what it needs. And look, he pointed to his environmental readings. The methane levels have dropped by 2% already. The second piece he took from his forearm, the third from his shoulder guard. For the next piece, a reinforced section of his back plate, the metal proved too thick for his multi-tool to cut through. After several frustrated attempts, Kale hesitated, then reached for Lena's geological hammer hanging at his belt. He held it for a moment, running his thumb over the engraved motto. Then, with a deep breath, he positioned the hammer's chisel edge against the plate seam and struck it sharply. The specialized tool bit into the metal, splitting the connection. With a few more precise blows, the plate came free. That's a unique tool, Lyra observed, noticing his careful handling of the hammer. It was a gift, Kyle said quietly, securing it back on his belt. From someone I lost. Each time the Guardian absorbed the metal, and each time its vital signs improved. The phosphorescent ooze receded, and the creature's surface began to regain a subtle sheen. With each piece sacrificed, the water flow from the hidden spring increased slightly, and the air quality improved incrementally. With the removal of each armor piece, Kale's suit functionality diminished. After the fifth piece, a stabilizer from his left thigh, the long-range scanner failed, leaving him blind to anything beyond the cave walls. After the seventh piece, the thermal regulator malfunctioned, and he began to shiver as the cave's natural coolness penetrated his suit. You are weakening yourself. Your only shield, Lyra said. There was no more hostility in her voice, only bewilderment. Why risk exposure to our toxic atmosphere? Some parts are more important than others, Cal replied, pointing to his chest plate and helmet. The life support system is here. As long as it's intact, I'm fine. And if I die from toxic exposure, the suit will be useless anyway. Might as well put it to good use while I'm alive. He glanced at his environmental sensor again. Besides, every piece I give him improves our situation. The air is becoming more breathable, the water more plentiful. It's buying us time. Some parts are more important than others, Kyle replied, pointing to his chest plate and helmet. The life support system is here. As long as it's intact, I'm fine. And if I die from toxic exposure, the suit will be useless anyway. Might as well put it to good use while I'm alive. He glanced at his environmental sensor again. Besides, every piece I give him improves our situation. The air is becoming more breathable, the water more plentiful. It's buying us time. A fragile truce was established between them, based on a common goal. He shared his exosuit piece by piece. She shared water from the hidden spring and edible mosses that grew at its edge. Each day they checked the methane levels together, a shared ritual that marked their tentative alliance. Though the toxic gas continued to seep into the cave, the Guardian's strengthening presence slowed its accumulation, extending their window of survival. During the nights when the temperature plummeted without his suit's regulators, Lyra shared her rough woven blanket. It was nothing like the synthetic fabrics of Earth, but it carried the faint scent of alien herbs and the warmth of another living being, comforts Kale had forgotten during his years of solitary exploration. They talked hours stretching into days, often while exploring more of the Guardian's memory projections. Kyle was particularly fascinated by the Alari's approach to geology. their understanding of planetary forces far beyond current human science. He told her of Earth, of the stars he had visited, of the wonders and horrors of the galaxy. She listened with the hunger of someone who had never left the confines of a single cave. One day, as he was working on another plate, his hand slipped, and the sharp edge of the metal cut his palm deeply. Blood welled up immediately, a bright crimson stream that pooled in his cupped hand before he could stop it. "Damn it," he cursed, cradling his injured hand. The cut was deep, slicing through muscle, and on a world without medical facilities, such a wound could quickly become infected or leave him permanently impaired. Lyra was by his side in an instant, moving with a fluid grace that belied her usual stillness. Without a word, she took his hand, brought it to her mouth, and licked the blood away. "Hey!" He tried to pull his hand back, shocked by the intimate gesture, but her grip was like steel, her fingers surprisingly strong. "Hush," she whispered, her breath warm against his skin. "My saliva. It heals." An ancient symbiotic link with the Guardian. And indeed, the pain subsided almost immediately, and the wound began to close before his eyes, the edges of the cut knitting together with unnatural speed. He looked at her, at this strange, wild girl who had just saved him from infection in a world without antibiotics, and realized that the line between self and other had completely blurred in this cave. They were no longer captor and prisoner, alien and human, but two survivors bound by circumstance and choice. "Thank you," he said softly. She released his hand and stepped back, suddenly self-conscious. "You are healing him," she said, nodding toward the Guardian, which was now visibly larger, its surface smoother. "It is only fair that we heal you." Yet despite their efforts, new threats emerged. On the fourth day, Kale noticed tiny crystalline formations growing from the cave floor. Beautiful but ominous structures that glowed with a sickly green luminescence. "What are these?" he asked, kneeling to examine them with his scanner. "Poison blooms," Lyra replied, her voice tight with concern. "They grow when the Guardian weakens. Their spores are deadly to both our species." She crushed one under her heel, and it shattered with a sound like breaking glass. Another sign of the cave's deterioration. Each day brought new challenges: the methane levels, the dwindling water, the poison blooms. Yet each sacrifice of Kale's suit brought temporary respite, a small victory against the inevitable. On the fifth day, the storm subsided. The silence that replaced the howling wind was deafening, making their ears ring with its sudden absence. "We can try to clear the rubble," Cal suggested, feeling a surge of optimism as he examined the collapsed entrance. "Your Guardian is stronger now. Maybe it can help." But his words were cut off by a new sound, a dull rhythmic thud coming from outside. It repeated again and again, growing slightly louder with each iteration. Thud, thud, thud. "What is that?" he whispered, pressing his ear against the rock wall. Lyra's face turned ashen, the blue tint of her skin fading to a sickly gray. "They are here," she breathed, backing away from the wall. "They, marauders, corporate scavengers. They tracked your ship's crash signal." Her voice was tight with fear. "They know this sector holds ancient Alari ruins. They are looking for technology, for artifacts they can sell." The thuds grew louder, closer. Thud crack, thud crack, the distinctive sound of industrial drilling equipment. "The Guardian is still too weak," Lyra said, retreating deeper into the cave, pulling at Kyle's arm. "He cannot defend himself. Not yet." Cal looked at the symbiote. It was larger, more vibrant than a few days ago, but still far from the mighty being Lyra had described in her stories. Then he looked at the remains of his exosuit, the helmet, the chest plate, and the life support system on his back. It wouldn't be enough. Not enough time, not enough metal. The drill broke through the rock with a thunderous crash. Debris rained into the cave, filling the air with dust. Through the newly formed hole, Cal saw the glint of armor and weapons. Advanced tech, military grade. Not simple scavengers then, but professional looters. "Come on out, survivor." A voice amplified by a megaphone boomed through the opening. "We know you're in there. Hand over the Alari tech, and maybe we'll let you live." "They're lying," Lyra whispered, her fingers digging into Cal's arm. "They will kill us all. Take him apart piece by piece. They've done it before, to other Guardians. That's how they know what to look for." Cal made his decision, There was no heroism in it, no despair, only the cold, clear logic of an engineer faced with an unsolvable problem. "Lyra," he said calmly, beginning to unfasten the clasps on his chest plate. "When I do this, you'll only have a few minutes before the air in here becomes toxic for me. The Guardian must act quickly." She looked at him, horror and understanding dawning in her eyes. "You can't." "I can," he replied, his mind racing through calculations and probabilities. "Listen to me. If they get the Guardian, they won't just kill us. They'll use his knowledge to develop weapons that could devastate countless worlds. You said it yourself. He's the collective consciousness of your people, your entire civilization's knowledge." He met her gaze steadily. "My crew is already dead. There's no rescue coming. But you and the Guardian could survive, could preserve what must not be lost." His fingers worked the final clasp. "You said I was the first meal in 500 years. It seems you were right." With a deafening screech, the drill tore through the wall, creating a breach large enough for a person to pass through. 3 marauders in heavy armor stormed into the cave, their weapons aimed at Lyra and the dimly glowing Guardian. "What a prize," their leader said, his voice distorted by his helmet speaker. His armor bore the Galaxy Corp insignia and a string of small crystalline objects. Trophies, Kale realized with disgust, hung from his belt. A living artifact. The corporation will pay handsomely. The leader stepped closer to Lyra, his head tilting as he studied her. Well, another keeper. The last one we found put up quite a fight." He fingered the crystalline pendants at his belt. These memory crystals from her hair fetched a fortune on the black market. The things we learned by cracking them open. I wonder what secrets you're keeping, little blue girl. Lyra's face contorted with horror and rage at the realization of what the pendants were. Sacred memory crystals from another murdered keeper. But they weren't looking at Kale. To them, he was just another survivor, a ragged man who posed no threat, a witness to be eliminated once they had secured their prize. And at that moment, he took off his helmet. The air of Krill hit his lungs like molten metal. Every breath was agony, his throat closing up as his body rejected the poisonous atmosphere. Microscopic silica needles pierced his alveoli, tearing them from the inside. He coughed violently, feeling blood fill his mouth, the metallic taste overwhelming his senses. "Kyle!" Lyra's cry was filled with pain, the sound of his name on her lips a revelation in itself. But he wasn't looking at her. His gaze was fixed on the Guardian, his vision already beginning to blur from oxygen deprivation. Gathering his last strength, he tore the life support pack from his back and threw it, along with the helmet and chest plate, to the foot of the symbiote. His hand went to his belt, where Lena's hammer still hung. For one heartbeat he hesitated, his fingers closing around the familiar handle. Then with a final effort, he unclipped it and tossed it toward the Guardian as well. "Eat," he rasped, collapsing to his knees as blood streamed from his nose and mouth. "Now!" The Guardian did not hesitate. Its tendrils shot forward with unexpected speed, enveloping the remains of the exosuit. A flash of blinding light flooded the cave, forcing the marauders to stagger back, their helmet visors automatically darkening to protect their eyes. Absorbing the pure energy and concentrated minerals, the symbiote began to change. Its dull surface began to glow, shining like polished obsidian. The cracks sealed themselves, releasing bursts of energy that crackled through the air like lightning. Its mass started to grow, filling the space, reaching toward the ceiling. The crystalline veins in the cave walls pulsed in sync with the Guardian's heartbeat, bathing everything in a pulsing, otherworldly light. Where before it had seemed amorphous, now distinct formations took shape. Structures reminiscent of the weapons Kale had seen in the memory projections, ancient Allery defenses never deployed in time to save their civilization. It no longer looked like a sick mountain. It looked like an angry god awakened from millennia of slumber. The Marauder leader was the first to recover from the shock. "Fire," he ordered, raising his plasma rifle. Bolts of searing energy struck the Guardian, but vanished into its shimmering surface without a trace, absorbed just as the metal had been. In response, crystalline spikes erupted from the symbiote's body, glowing with inner fire. They moved with incredible speed, piercing the Marauder's armor as if it were paper. The spikes pulsed, drawing energy and metal from the intruder's suits, just as they had from Kale's, but violently, hungrily. Among the crystalline formations, Kale glimpsed Lena's hammer, now integrated into the Guardian structure but still recognizable, its engraved motto gleaming with inner light. Beyond horizons, beneath surfaces. It had become part of something greater, just as he soon would. Screams echoed through the cave, cut short as the spikes retracted, dragging the men into the creature's mass. Their weapons, their armor, their very bodies became fuel for the Guardian's transformation. The fight was over before it began. Kale's world had narrowed to a single point. Lyra's face leaning over him. He was suffocating, his lungs on fire, his body convulsing as it fought for oxygen that wasn't there. Each heartbeat sent waves of agony through his chest. His vision dimmed around the edges, darkness creeping in. "You idiot," she whispered, tears streaming down her blue cheeks. "A selfless, brave idiot." "Worth it," he wheezed, blood bubbling between his lips. "To see you cry." He wanted to tell her more, about how her stories had made him feel less alone than he had in years, about how her eyes reminded him of the silver seas on Titan, about how, in this cave at the end of everything, he had found something worth dying for. As consciousness began to slip away, the Guardian projected one final vision for him alone. Not the war, not destruction, but a moment of perfect peace. The dawn of a binary star system over Aerialis, the crystal spires catching the first light. We died. Civilization at the height of its beauty. It was a gift, Kyle realized dimly. A thank you, a farewell. But darkness was claiming him, the edges of his vision turning black. The last thing he felt was something large, warm, and strong enveloping him. Not death, he realized with his final conscious thought. The Guardian. Kyle awoke to a sense of peace so profound it was almost alien. He was breathing, easily, freely, without pain. He opened his eyes and found himself surrounded by a soft, amber glow. He was inside a translucent, gently pulsing capsule. The air inside was pure, cool, with a faint scent of something like cinnamon. Through the capsule's walls, he could see Lyra, sitting close, leaning against it. Her eyes were closed, her face serene in rest. Behind her loomed the Guardian, no longer a dying relic, but a magnificent being that filled half the cave, its surface gleaming like polished metal, pulsing with inner light. A part of its own body had formed this life-saving shell around Kale. Near where his head rested inside the capsule, he noticed a familiar shape embedded in the translucent material. Lena's geological hammer, preserved but transformed, the engraved motto now glowing with the same inner light as the crystalline veins that ran throughout the Guardian's form. No longer just a memento of loss, but a bridge between his past and his future. He placed a hand against the inner surface of the capsule. It was warm, almost skin-like in texture, and seemed to respond to his touch with a gentle pulse. Lyra's eyes snapped open, instantly alert. When she saw him conscious, a smile transformed her face, making her look younger, unburdened. "He saved you," she said, her voice sounding directly in his mind, just as it had the first time. There was no need for sound to cross the barrier between them. "He has created a perfect environment for you, filtering the air. He says you are part of him now, part of us." Cal looked at his hands, turning them over in wonder. His skin had taken on a faint bluish hue, similar to Lyra's but less pronounced, and beneath it, tiny crystalline particles seemed to shimmer when he moved. "What's happened to me?" he thought, knowing she would hear. "You are the new keeper," Lyra replied, placing her hand against the capsule, mirroring his. "You gave him your armor, and he gave you a new life. We are bound, the three of us, forever. The Marauders? Gone, absorbed. Their knowledge added to ours. Their ship waits outside, intact." "We could leave," Kale thought, a surge of hope rising in him. "All of us. Find a better world." "Yes," Lyra replied, and her smile widened. "We could." Cal looked at her, at the enormous symbiotic Guardian that had remade him, and for the first time in long years, he felt that he was not alone. He was home. Here, in the heart of a dying planet, he had found what he never had, a family. They were a strange, impossible family, born of desperation and sacrifice. And ahead of them lay an entire universe to explore. He pressed his palm more firmly against the capsule wall. On the other side, Lyra's hand met his, separated by a membrane thinner than thought. In that moment, their minds touched, and he felt her joy, her hope, her fear, all of it as real and vital as his own emotions. "Where do we go now?" he asked silently. "Somewhere they won't find us," she answered. "And then, everywhere." Deep within the Guardian, the knowledge of a lost civilization stirred, awakening after centuries of dormancy. It had guardians again, keepers to carry it to the stars. The last of the Alari would live on. Days later, a sleek ship rose from the surface of Krill, its engines reconfigured by technologies long thought lost. Inside were three travelers: a human with crystalline eyes that reflected the stars, a blue-skinned woman who had never before left her cave, and the consciousness of an entire civilization, ready to witness the universe anew.